Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Action for the Soul. I hope you are having a fantastic day. This week we start the third book of the five books of Moses, Parashat Vayikra, and or Sefer Vayikra. The book itself is almost 2/3 of this book has to do very much specifically about sacrifices. The Parsha begins with this idea that Moshe is being called out to God, right? He's being called out by God, and he's asking him to come back into the tent of meetings. The Parsha ended with, the book of Exodus ends with, and God rests, Ki anan Hashem al hamishkan, and that the cloud of God would be on the Mishkan, the tabernacle, Yomam by day, the Ish and the fire, Tihiyeh, would be Laila at night, Bo, Le'nei kol Beit Yisrael b'kol ma'asehem, before the eyes of the entire house of Israel throughout their journeys. So the Jewish people end the story of their families, their ancestors, the hardships, the exile of Egypt, and it comes to this massive peak, this zenith of, wow, we brought God down. We sinned, we made mistakes. We were embittered as slaves in the land of Egypt. And now we're at a place where we're able to walk man and God together. Can you imagine that sight for a minute? You're looking at a structure that mankind created, built with the help of God, of course. And now you have the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of God resting in it. That's profound. Like no more doubt, no more uncertainty, no more of that like, maybe, maybe not. 100% crystal clear, five-finger knowledge, we call it, the complete knowledge, the awareness of there being a God, a Borei Olam. Imagine having that kind of clarity. If you knew with certainty that there was a God, you saw every single day, Yomam v'Laila, day and night, would you have the suffering that you're all too often dealing with? Would you have that doubt? Would you have those feelings of anxiety, of not being sure why I'm going through these hardships? And the answer is you probably would not. As a result of having that kind of clarity, you are fully aware that every single aspect of your life, that every moment, that every incident, that every, God forbid, the mistakes that we've made, everything, all the challenge that we have gone through, we're part of a master plan. There are no accidents. I'm going to try to be better today. I can't change the past again, but I can focus and imagine a bigger, greater future for myself and the world around me. So the Parsha begins with Vayikra, El Moshe. And God called out, and he called out to Moshe, V'yidaber Hashem elav. And God had spoken to him from the Ol Moed, Lemor, saying. Now, we have to pause for a minute, because if you're reading a book and you're noticing that there's a massive font change, it bothers you. Either it's a mistake from the publisher, or they're trying to express something more deeply. And if you look at the word Vayikra, right, you'll notice that the word Vayikra itself, right, the aleph, the last letter of that word is small. And you've heard all kinds of reasons for it, and they're all good reasons. The aleph is small because Moses did not want to have sound, didn't want the pasuk to sound as if he had this direct relation with Borei Olam. He was uncomfortable with it, and instead he says, change the word Vayikra to Vayikar, right? That happenstance, it was an accident, it was a chance meeting, it was a coincidence. And God says, no, I don't want it to be a coincidence. So Moses says, well, you know what, then at least let's do something. Let's make the font on the aleph a little smaller to show that I was uncomfortable with this. And everyone asks the following question. Right? Should be your question. Why now? Why here? There are other pesukim in the book of Shemot, in the book of Exodus, where you see God calling out to Moshe. Why now? Why here is this aleph small? And more than that, what's he really trying to teach us here? Is this humility? Is this real humility? The fact that he's asking to be humble, that we are aware of that, is that real? Well, is that real humility when I say to someone, listen, I want to be humble right now. Make that thing a little smaller for me. What is true humility? How do we understand it? Now, I'm going to argue that humility is the trait that is a prerequisite for all wisdom and knowledge. I cannot have a conversation with you if you don't have humility. And what humility does is humility reminds you that you don't have all the answers. Humility reminds you that, you know what, sometimes I need to seek out other people for answers. That, like, even though as much as I try to put in my own efforts and use my knowledge to get clarity, sometimes, you know what, I can't trust myself. I have to find a mentor, a guide, someone who's going to be there, who's going to help me get a bigger, greater understanding of the world around me or the situation that I'm in. Humility begs you to ask the question, are you sure? It doesn't mean being, always in a state of uncertainty. Humility is not about being the small little guy in the corner. We all too often mistake humility for the word humiliation. Right? When you think in your mind of a humble person, do you think of someone strong, muscular, holding a sword out, running into war? Or when you think of the word humility, do you think of a guy bent over, over a book, sitting in the corner of the synagogue with a little candle? What image in your mind do you use to think of the word humility? So let's clarify things. Number one, Moses, the most humble man that ever lived, and it's written in the book itself that he wrote. How do we explain that kind of humility? Okay, someone who has good midah. But let's explain what that means. So let's clarify. The word humility in Judaism means two things, and this is true for every single trait in Judaism. Any trait to any one extreme is considered bad. Being too humble is bad. Having too much kindness is bad. Loving someone too much can be bad. So how do we find that proper balance, the boundary? What's the golden means of expressing any trait? So on the one hand, when it comes to humility asks us to say, are you willing to stand up for what you believe in? Are you willing to fight for what you think is true? But at the same time, are you humble enough to hear somebody else's position before you're going to make a stand? So on the one hand, humility demands that you are able to be clear about who you are. The humility demands that you have in your one pocket a verse that says, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, that the world was created for me. And in the other pocket, you have another little paper that says, Ani afar ve'efar, I'm nothing but the dust of the earth. So on the one hand, I think of myself as being the sole purpose of creation. And on the other hand, I think of myself as being, nothing but a grain of sand. Well, what does that place in between look like? The place in between means that I have responsibility, that I can't be passive. If I'm nothing, I'm doing nothing. I'm useless. I'm hopeless, right? I'll be humiliated. But that's not what humility is. Humility is the clarity, the understanding of what you are, of what your responsibilities are. Are you willing to fight wars? Moses takes an axe and runs out into the battlefield. He's not a crouched over, humble old man sitting in the corner with a candle. He's the lawgiver. He's the lover of people. But he's ferocious like a lion. That, my friends, is humility. But at the same time, that same ferociousness leaves him into the place of saying, you know what? I'm nothing in the face of God. I have so much more to grow. It's that trait, I truly believe, that allows Moses, the prince of Egypt, to transform himself into Moses, Rabbeinu, our teacher, our prophet, the greatest Navi that ever lived. He was fueled by a very different kind of trait. Now, we have other great prophets in our heritage. You have Abraham, you have Isaac, you have Jacob, amazing people, right? You have Aaron. But what makes Moses unique is that his trait was humility. And when you're able to express humility to its fullest extent, okay, you transform not only yourself, but the world around you. It's a true story in the late 1800s. There was a Rabbi Abramsky, who was a big rabbi, and he was asked to come on a local court case, and he was going to testify. And there was a lot of rumors about who he was. So someone asked him, they said, Rabbi, the judge asked him, says, is it true? He says that you're the greatest living Jewish legal authority in Europe. So the rabbi says, yeah, I am. At that point, the judge stops, right? He said to the rabbi, isn't that haughty on your part? I thought your laws teach you about ethics and morality and humility. How could you say that you're the most? How could you say that you're the greatest living Jewish legal authority in Europe? So what did Rabbi Abramsky answer? He says, I know, I was taught to be humble, but what can I do? I'm under oath. I have no choice. I got to tell the truth, right? That kind of conviction and clarity of understanding the role, I got to tell the truth. But is that humble to say that you're humble? And the answer is yes. If it's true, yes. So what does Moshe say? Moshe says over here, you know what? I'm about to start writing a book about sacrifice, korbanot, right? And we use the word sacrifice incorrectly. The word Vayikra, korban, has nothing to do with a sacrifice. Korban means karov, means to come close. I want a relationship with you. I want to be connected. It's hard to have a conversation today on any topic without stopping for a moment and listening to a little bit about what's happening on the other side of the planet. Okay? Ukrainians are under attack by the Russians. Okay? I'm not getting into politics. I'm getting into the idea that there are people around the world that were living as comfortable as you and I were, and now they're on the run, refugees. In a moment, everything that we have around us, our home, our communities, we're so safe and secure, but look at that. In a few weeks, the whole thing goes lost. They're living in a city which is being shelled and bombed. What are we doing to feel a sense of responsibility? Humility would get you to get up and do something, right? But if you're lacking humility, you're going to be passive. You see, humility isn't about just, being patient and being somewhat subdued. Humility means understanding that I have a responsibility not only to myself, but to the world around me. Ready? Moshe says, Vayikra el Moshe. Pasuk says that. What does he say? Make the aleph small. Why? Because people spend too much time thinking that they're the aleph. I'm number one. You know what the word aleph means? It also means aluf, which means officer. Okay? I am the number one. Aleph, the letter number one, it's all about me. I'm the officer. I'm the greatest. I'm the best. No. You want to live in a world of being karov? You want to be close to God? You know how you start? By diminishing the self for a minute. Start thinking about the needs of the people around you. Make the aleph smaller. Look outside of the boundary of yourself. Pull yourself away from your own narcissistic view of your world. Become something bigger and more profound. How are you helping the world? How are you helping those in need around you? What are you doing to make it a better place? Moshe is teaching you, my friends. You think that the sacrifice that God wants, your bulls, you think he wants your shawarma offerings and your wheat offerings and your barley offerings and the olah and your mincha? He doesn't care about that. You know what he cares most about? He cares most about one thing: how you treat his other children, how we respect each other, how do we care for one another, how are we speaking to one another, how are we providing for one another, what are we doing to care for the planet, what are we doing to care for the people around us, for the aniyim, for the poor people, for the refugees, what are we doing? And if the answer is, well, I'm too busy right now, you're missing the point, my friends. You see, life throws out circumstances. I can't change the fact that there are people that are suffering. I can't change what happened. I can only change my response. I can change my heart. I'm supposed to interpret the world around me. I'm supposed to look at it and ask, how am I supposed to react to this? How am I going to respond to this? No response means you're part of the Walking Dead. You're a zombie, my friend. Sorry. You're not thinking. You're brainwashed. Okay? Thinking to be a Jew means to think. To be a Jew means to be proactively looking for truth. There is no passivity. There is no inaction. There's only what kind of action does the situation, present itself with. That's all. So Moshe is saying, Vayikra, my friends, you want to learn about how to get close to the Borei Olam? Make yourself small. Work on that humility. Think outside of the margins. Become a greater human being. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that at the end of days, Mashiach will come. And the students of Rabbi Eliezer asked them, Rabbi, what can we do to protect ourselves from Yomot Mashiach? Pasuk says, Ashrei ha'ish asher yesham. Praiseworthy is the man that's going to be there to see what happens at that final battle of Gog uMagog. And it says, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo yesham. And praiseworthy is the man that will not be there. Well, which one is it? Well, it's a little bit of both. You see, I have good news and bad news, my friends. The good news is that Ashrei Ha'isha Asher Yesham, I have a suspicion that they're talking about us. We're those individuals that are going to see all the greatest things that are going to happen in history. We're part of it. We're poised. We're there. We're at the end. We're getting closer. Okay? Now, there's this other side of Ashrei Ha'isha Asher Lo Yesham. Why? Because the world's going to go through a lot of suffering. They did I'm doing a lot of reading on Ukraine and Russia and war games and World War III. And there's one scenario that in the first within the first 2 weeks of a world war, 1 billion people on planet Earth are going to go. Done. Right? Painful, crazy, terrifying. And it's like, it shows how it would happen, where it would happen. You want to understand the war games and what are the plotted different things and how they're going to, erupt. Fascinating stuff. I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about it. Okay? Because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'll tell you what I do know. I know that the measure of my success, the measure of my greatness, is very much dependent on my ability to give, my ability to respond back. Am I caring for my spouse? Am I caring for my children? Am I caring for my neighbor? Am I caring for the people in my community? Am I thinking about the world around me? Again, if all I'm doing is thinking about the aleph of me, I'm losing out. The whole temple, right? The temple itself, right, was a place where Jews went up to bring these sacrifices. We don't have a temple today. Do you know what we have instead? We have something called the synagogue. You know where the synagogue comes from? The word synagogue is actually a Greek word from synagoga, which means a meeting place. Why was the tikkun, the rectification for the loss of the temple, a synagogue, a meeting place? Think about it, my friends. Because in exile, the only hope that you and I have, the only chance that you and I have for survival is with each other. That's it. You want to know how we survived 2,000 years of exile? Because Jews built strong connections to people, to family. We care about people. There are people that are on this chat that I pray for, that I think about all the time, that I would drop in a second, a heartbeat, I'd stop everything I'm doing, I'd run out to even as far as Deal, New Jersey, right? I'd go out there because that's how I see myself, as being someone who feels a sense of responsibility for the people around us, right? But it's hard. We're distracted. I get it. We have our own lives. We have so much going around us. So when these kinds of moments happen, the way in which we're able to protect ourselves, so to speak, ensure that we are going to go with a good conscience, is knowing that you and I did everything we can to give back on some level. I'm not saying you have to go out and quit your job and go volunteer on the front lines. I'm just saying it's got to bother you. You got to stop in your Shmona Esrei, when you're praying, the Amidah, stop and pray for these people. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, what would you want someone else to do for you if you were in their circumstances? And then go ahead and do it. This is an amazing story yesterday of a woman in Israel who was saved by a Ukrainian woman during the Holocaust. They brought her to her house. Now her children are saving that Ukrainians who took her in. The grandchildren in Israel are taking in her grandchildren in Israel. Can you imagine the chesed? You saved my parents, my grandparents. I'm saving your grandchildren. How crazy is that? How beautiful is that? Mi ka'amcha Yisrael, who are like it's crazy. Not only the fact that the grandchildren were aware of the names of the grandchildren whose grandmother saved them, right? Think about that. That, my friends, is amazing, amazing true chesed. It's beautiful, amazing that they could do that for them. I'm jealous. I wish I could do that for them. I wish I could go out and have someone who I could help and protect them that way. But at the very least, I know that my prayers are with them, my charity, my dollars are there with them. If there's anything beyond that I can do, I'm ready to go out and do it. And that's what Moshe is saying. You want to worry about the religious aspects of connecting to God? Forget about it, my friends. That's all a coincidence, right? You want to hear God calling out to you? You want God to listen to your prayer, to your korban? You want to come close? Make yourself smaller. Open yourself up. Open your hearts for a moment to the needs of the other people around you. Open yourself up to the possibility of being more humble. This is the trait that we desperately need in our generation. We live in a crazy time where you have all these wokeists who they have their own language, their own ideas, they're changing what words mean, and value systems and so on and so forth. There's never been a time in our history where we needed people to have a clear understanding of what humility is. If our president had an iota of humility, he would have never allowed for what's happening in Ukraine to have happened. He would have created a much more, I believe, I apologize, I would believe that if he was a bit stronger, this would have never happened, And I think that this lesson that Moshe is teaching, this is a small little letter, by the way, one little letter in the Torah, right? It's super clear. You and I have a responsibility to humanity. We have a responsibility to ourselves. Vayikra Hashem el Moshe v'yidaber elav me'ol moed. Where is he calling from? The house of the Lord. What does he say to them? Daber b'nei Israel, speak to the Jewish people, v'amart aleim, and say to them, Adam, a man, ki yakriv mikem korban la Hashem, a man who wants to bring an offering to the Almighty. Min ha'behema, from an animal, min ha'bakar, from the cattle, min hatzod, from the flock, takrivu al karbanchem, you shall bring your offering. It goes on, all the offerings you got to bring, how you bring it, where do you put it, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, he says as follows. I want to end it with this. No. He says like this. Hold on a second. Mechila. No, it's not here. He says like this. Ultimately, what he's saying is, this is the point that I want to get to. He says he's got to go to the Kohen. The Kohen he goes through the Pasukim, go through all of the avodah, all of the work, everything that has to happen in order to make this korban a korban. The Kohen would take this offering and he would offer on the altar, and the man who was seeing the innards of this animal being set on fire recognizes that this could have been him, but instead he's sitting there enjoying the show, so to speak, of the rabbi, of the Kohen, who's making the sacrifice. But the Pasuk says like this. Where's the Shema? Hikri the Kohen. 1 second. I just had it. Okay, I can't find it. But nefesh, a person, ki techteh, who will sin, v'shama kol, accepted a demand, olah, for an oath, v'hu, and he is ed, a witness, o ra'ah, or he saw, o yada, or he knew, im lo yagid nafash avano, he does not testify, he shall bear his own iniquity. O nefesh, or a person, asher tig'ah, touches b'chol davar temeh. We go through all these things. Why are we getting into this? Why are we talking about these interesting rules and laws about purity and impurity? Because ultimately, we live in a world of consequence. You see, your behavior, your actions are not for naught. Everything that we do and we don't do, the perasha is telling us, every verse in this perasha is telling you, my friends, that what we do matters. You impact the world. You get up, you have a positive thought, you're bringing down spiritual energy to heal the world. You are having negative thoughts, you're involved in bringing down negative powers into the world around you. That, my friends, is your choice. What does Moshe say? You know how you get yourself focused? You focus yourself by clarifying who you are and where you're going, opening yourself up to the possibility of being wrong, opening yourself up to the potential of loving people around you. Like this, you, my friends, are able to create a bigger, greater, stronger world. Not a world where people are taken advantage of, not a world where we have refugees. It's interesting, we live in a time in history where we can end all suffering, pretty much. We have enough food. That was always an issue. That's food everywhere. Luxury. I mean, we're living more luxurious than any other time in history, right? You and I are living at a time where there are massive medical breakthroughs that are happening. In the next 10 years, if we don't destroy ourselves, we will see ourselves having the ability to heal almost all disease. We're going to get there in our lifetimes. But the only way we're going to get there is if we start working with each other. Humility wouldn't allow Putin to invade another country, right? Because it's not about what he wants for himself over the will of others. But when it's only about me and myself, we end up destroying the world. We have to do this together. And if we're able to do that together, I believe we'll be able to bring back the Shekhinah. We'll bring back God's Spirit into the world, and we'll have the clarity, the knowledge necessary to remind ourselves that everything has a purpose, nothing is accidental, that all of our lives were part of a bigger, greater picture, and together, through our choices, we can make the world a much better, greater place. How do you start? Make that aleph a little bit smaller, right? Look outside of the boundaries, and you'll find yourself living in a world with so much more meaning. I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom Mevarach. This week is the Parshat Zachor. It's about remembering, not just about what Amalek did, but also about remembering, what our mission is as Jews. We don't believe in happenstance. We believe that the world has meaning and purpose. You choose to either live a life like an Amaleki, someone who believes in Vayikra and things happen accidentally, or believing like Jews believe, having hoda'ah, being grateful for every moment in life, because every moment in life is a blessing. Again, Shabbat Shalom Mevarach. God willing, we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening.